bridge of the human dreadnought Indomitable shook violently as another Varelian plasma bolt struck the shields. Captain Dayoon gripped the command rail, watching the tactical display with cold focus. Dozens of red markers swarmed across the screen, each one representing a Varelian bioship intent on destroying everything in its path. The swarm had been consuming star systems for 3 years now, and this battle at the edge of the Khazari Nebula would determine the fate of half the galaxy. "Shields at 40%, his tactical officer reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Dayon nodded and opened the fleet channel. "All human vessels maintain formation. Keep firing on the designated targets. Don't let them break through." Next to the human fleet, the massive Thelrene warships moved with ancient grace. Their vessels were 3 times larger than anything humanity could build, covered in ornate armor that had been forged centuries before humans even discovered fire. The Thelrene were the oldest and most powerful civilization in the known galaxy, rulers of an empire that stretched across 200 systems. When the Varelian swarm first appeared, the Thelrene had called for a galactic coalition to fight the threat. Humanity, barely a century into space exploration, had been invited to join. Admiral Jiho commanded the joint fleet from his flagship, coordinating both human and Thelrene forces with practiced efficiency. He was one of the few humans the Thelrene seemed to respect, though that respect came grudgingly. The reptilian aliens viewed humanity as children playing with weapons they barely understood. In their eyes, humans were useful only because they were willing to die in large numbers. Lieutenant Hygiene led a boarding team through the corridors of a damaged Varelian bioship. Her squad moved fast, placing explosive charges on the organic support structures that kept the creature alive. The Varelian vessels weren't really ships at all. They were living organisms grown specifically for war. Inside, the walls pulsed with alien biology, and the air reeked of ammonia and decay. "Charges set," Hygiene reported over her com. "Evacuating now?" Her team sprinted back to their assault shuttle, sealing the airlock just as the charges detonated. The bioship shuddered and began to die, its neural systems destroyed. This was the 3rd ship Hygiene's team had killed this week. The Thelrene considered such boarding actions beneath them, too dangerous and brutal for their noble warriors. Humans had no such pride. They did what needed to be done. On Earth, billions watched the battlefields with desperate hope. Humanity had committed everything to this war. 70% of the entire human military was here at Khazari Nebula, fighting alongside the coalition. Earth's defenses were minimal, the colonies barely protected, but the decision had been unanimous. If the swarm wasn't stopped here, there would be no safe place anywhere. Better to risk everything on victory than to hide and wait for extinction. The battle raged for 18 hours. Human ships used speed and unpredictability, darting between the slower Thelrene dreadnoughts, drawing fire and creating openings. Commander Minji coordinated the carrier groups, launching wave after wave of fighters to overwhelm the swarm's defenses. Every human pilot knew they were outmatched in technology, but they made up for it with tactics the swarm couldn't predict. Humans fought dirty, used deception, retreated, and ambushed. The Varelians were efficient killers, but they followed patterns. Humans broke patterns. As the hours passed, the tide began to turn. The swarm's central hive node lay deep within the nebula, a massive organism the size of a small moon. Intelligence indicated that destroying it would fragment the swarm's coordination, turning the organized assault into confused chaos. The combined fleet pushed forward, taking heavy casualties but gaining ground meter by meter. Captain Dayoon's ship lost 2 engine sections and half its weapons, but it kept firing. Around him, human vessels died in flashes of light, their crews sacrificing themselves to protect the Thelrene heavy ships that carried the weapons needed to kill the hive node. It was a brutal calculation, human lives traded for Thelrene firepower. But it was working. Admiral Jiho coordinated the final assault plan with his Thelrene counterpart, a massive reptilian commander named Thelvas. The plan was simple. The human fleet would create a corridor through the swarm's defenses, absorbing the worst of the enemy fire. The Thelrene capital ships would then advance through that corridor and unleash their planet-killer weapons on the hive node. Total victory was 6 hours away. Lieutenant Hijin and her boarding teams rested in their ready room, treating wounds and checking equipment. They had lost 14 operators today, good soldiers who would never see home again. But they had killed 6 bioships, each one carrying thousands of Vrelian organisms. The mathematics of war were harsh but clear. "Get some food and sleep," Hijin told her team. "Tomorrow we finish this." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Dayan allowed himself a moment of hope. The battle was not won yet, but victory seemed possible for the first time. The Thalreen had kept their word, fighting alongside humanity despite their obvious disdain. The Alliance had held. After this, perhaps the galaxy would finally see humans as equals rather than primitives. "Commander," Aminji reviewed casualty reports in her quarters. 43 ships lost, over 15,000 human lives gone. But the mission was succeeding. She thought about the millions back on Earth, watching and praying. They were all depending on this fleet, on these sacrifices. She recorded a message to be sent home if she didn't survive the final push. "We fought well. We fought together. Tell my family I love them." The fleet regrouped for the final assault. Human ships took up their positions, damaged but determined. The Thalreen capital ships charged their massive weapons, preparing to deliver the killing blow. Admiral Jiho sent the final coordination signals to all vessels. In 6 hours, they would advance. The swarm would die. The war would end. Nobody knew that in 3 hours, everything would change. The Alliance was about to shatter in the worst possible way. Admiral Jiho stared at his communication console in disbelief. The Thalreen fleet signatures were disappearing from his tactical display one by one. He opened the emergency channel to Commander Thelva's, but received only static. "Communications. What's happening?" he demanded. "Sir, the Thalreen vessels are activating jump drives," his officer reported, voice shaking. "They're leaving the system." On the Indomitable, Captain Dayon watched in horror as the massive Thalreen dreadnoughts began to shimmer and vanish. "This has to be a mistake," he said, but even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't. The Thalreen were abandoning them. 3 hours before the final assault, with the human fleet extended deep into enemy territory, the Alliance was breaking apart. Jiho tried every communication channel he had. He sent emergency signals, formal requests, desperate pleas. Nothing came back except silence. Within 15 minutes, every single Thalreen vessel had jumped away, leaving the human fleet alone in the Khazari Nebula. Surrounded by the Vrelian swarm, Lieutenant Hijin felt the ship's alert klaxons begin to blare. She grabbed her rifle and ran to the bridge, arriving just in time to see the tactical situation collapse. Without the Thalreen heavy ships, the human fleet had no way to destroy the hive node. Worse, they were now outnumbered 10-1, with no support and no reinforcements possible. "Captain, what are your orders?" she asked. Dayon made the hardest decision of his life. All ships begin fighting retreat. Get to minimum safe jump distance and prepare to evacuate the system. His hands shook as he sent the order. They had come so close to victory. Now they were fighting just to survive. The Vrelian swarm sensed the sudden weakness and attacked with renewed fury. The bioships surged forward like a living tide, their weapons tearing into the human formation. The Valor, a human cruiser that had survived 2 years of combat, exploded under concentrated fire. The Dauntless lost all power and began to drift, helpless. Captain Dayon ordered rescue shuttles to retrieve survivors. But there were so many ships in trouble, so many crews dying. Commander Minji saw her carrier group getting cut off from the main fleet. She made her decision instantly. All carriers, full power to weapons. Target the enemy concentration between us and the Admiral's position. We're going to punch a hole for them to escape through. Her officers understood what she was ordering. This was a suicide run. "Ma'am, we won't survive that approach," her tactical officer said quietly. "I know," Minji replied. "But they will. Send the signal." The carrier group turned and charged directly into the thickest part of the swarm. Every weapon fired at maximum output. Every fighter launched in a desperate attack. The carriers were not built for direct combat. They were support vessels, fragile compared to dreadnoughts. But they fought with everything they had. Minji stood on her bridge as enemy fire began to overwhelm the shields. "For Earth," she said, and then her ship exploded in a flash of nuclear fire. Her sacrifice bought the time needed. Admiral Jiho led the remnants of the fleet through the gap, racing toward the edge of the system where they could safely jump. Behind them, the swarm gave chase, but the human ships were faster. One by one, they reached minimum safe distance and jumped away, leaving the Kasari Nebula behind. Of the 300 ships that had entered the battle, only 47 made it back to human space. 15,000 dead had become 70,000. Entire families wiped out. Entire worlds left without defenders. The Indomitable limped into Earth orbit, with half its crew gone and 3 of its 5 sections venting atmosphere on Earth. Director Sun Wu of Human Defense Command received the reports with a face carved from stone. He had sent those ships out with promises of victory and alliance. Now he had to tell humanity that their allies had abandoned them to die. He walked to the Global Broadcast Center and stood before the cameras, his uniform bearing the scorch marks from a hull breach he had personally helped seal. "People of Earth," he began, his voice carrying to every colony, every station, every human settlement across 30 light years. "Today, we learned a terrible truth about the galaxy we live in. The Thalrene Empire, our allies, abandoned us in battle. They left us to die so they could save themselves." He paused, letting the words sink in. Across Earth, riots began in some cities, while others fell into stunned silence. Sun Wu continued, "We have intercepted communications between the Thalrene and the Vrelian swarm. Our allies made a deal. They offered us as a sacrifice in exchange for the swarm redirecting its expansion away from their territory." The words hit like physical blows. Betrayal was one thing, but this was calculated murder on a species-wide scale. The Thalrene had not simply abandoned humanity, they had sold them out. "The swarm has accepted their offer," Sun Wu said. "Long-range sensors show the entire Varelian force redirecting toward human space. They will arrive at our outer colonies in 3 weeks. Earth itself will be under attack in 6 weeks. He let that timeline settle. 6 weeks to prepare for an enemy that had been destroying worlds for 3 years. "We have no allies now," Sun Wu continued. "We have sent requests for aid to every member of the Galactic Coalition. Some species have expressed regret. None have offered help. The galaxy is content to watch humanity die." Captain Dayon sat in his damaged ship and listened to the broadcast. Around him, his surviving crew tended to the wounded and repaired critical systems. They had fought with everything they had, trusted in the alliance, believed in cooperation. All of it had been a lie. Lieutenant Haijin cleaned her rifle in the barracks, listening to the director's words. Her boarding team had lost half its members in the retreat. Good soldiers, friends, people who had trusted that the Thalrene would be there to support them. She felt a cold rage building in her chest. A fury unlike anything she had experienced before. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Grief turned to anger, shock transformed into hatred. The species that had looked down on humanity, that had called them primitives and children, had now tried to exterminate them through treachery. Director Sun Wu finished his broadcast with words that would echo through history. "We have 6 weeks. Make them count. We will not go quietly into the dark. If this galaxy wants humanity dead, they will learn exactly what it costs to kill us. I promise you this, we will survive. And when we do, the species that betrayed us will learn to regret this day for the rest of their existence." The broadcast ended. In homes and barracks, on ships and stations, humans began to prepare. They did not know about the secret plans already in motion, the hidden fleets and intelligence networks that had been built for exactly this possibility. All they knew was that they had been betrayed. And that knowledge turned into a weapon more dangerous than any the galaxy had seen before. The countdown had begun. 3 days before the betrayal, Intelligence Officer Yuna sat in an underground facility, beneath the lunar surface, and read the intercepted communication for the 5th time. The message was encrypted in Thalrene military code, but humanity had broken that encryption 2 years ago. The contents were clear. The Thalrene Empire was planning to abandon the human fleet at Khazari Nebula and redirect the swarm toward human space. She picked up her secure communicator and called Director Sunwoo. "Sir, the betrayal is confirmed. They'll execute it in 72 hours. Can we stop it?" Sunwoo asked. "And we shouldn't try. This is exactly what we've been waiting for. For 30 years, ever since first contact with the Galactic Coalition, a small group within human leadership had operated on a simple assumption. The galaxy could not be trusted. Every alliance was temporary, every treaty only as good as the mutual benefit it provided. Humanity needed to prepare for the day when cooperation would end and survival would depend entirely on human strength alone. Yuna had been recruited into this program at 23, fresh from military intelligence training. Her job was simple in concept but vast in scope. Learn everything about every alien species humanity encountered. Find their weaknesses, map their infrastructure, identify their strategic vulnerabilities, and do it all while maintaining the appearance of friendly cooperation. Over 3 decades, she had built the most extensive intelligence network in galactic history. Every technology share with alien species had included hidden backdoors. Every cultural exchange had concealed data-gathering operations. Every diplomatic mission had mapped military installations and industrial centers. The aliens thought they were teaching primitive humans how the galaxy worked. In reality, humanity was learning how to take it all. Apart, General Junho commanded the secret construction project in the outer darkness beyond the Kuiper Belt. The shipyards there were built using stolen asteroids and hidden from every form of detection humanity knew the aliens possessed. For 20 years, ships had been constructed in absolute secrecy, using technology reverse-engineered from dozens of species and improved by human innovation. The Shadow Fleet numbered over 400 vessels, more than the official human navy. They were built using techniques the Thalrene would consider violations of galactic law, weapons that were banned by coalition treaty, drives that pushed the boundaries of physics. Humanity had agreed to every restriction the aliens demanded while building the means to ignore those restrictions when necessary. JUNHO received the go signal from Sunwoo, smiled coldly. "All personnel begin final preparations. In 6 weeks, we launch." Round him. Crews that had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come began checking systems and loading weapons. They had watched their official fleet go to Khazari Nebula, knowing many would never return. Now, it was their turn. Dr. Bowman worked in a cyber warfare facility hidden inside Mars. Olympus Mons. His specialty was digital infiltration and system sabotage. Every piece of technology humanity had ever shared with the Galactic Coalition contained his hidden code, dormant and undetectable until activated. The code was elegant in its simplicity. It would spread through connected systems, mapping network architecture and identifying critical control nodes. Then it would wait. "How long until you can deploy the virus?" Sunwoo asked him over SecureCom. "The moment you give the word, it's active across the entire Thalrene Empire," Bowman replied. "Their military networks, power grids, communications, everything we've touched will start failing. And Director, we've touched everything." The secret leadership met in the lunar facility as the Khazari Nebula battle reached its climax. Yuna presented the final intelligence reports. "The Thalrene think they're using us as a shield. They believe the swarm will consume humanity while they rebuild their forces. What they don't know is that we've been preparing for this exact scenario for 3 decades. Sunwoo looked around the room at the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to this moment. "When the betrayal happens, the public will be devastated. We need that. We need humanity angry and united. But more importantly, we need the galaxy to think we're finished. Let them watch the swarm advance toward Earth. Let them assume humanity is about to be destroyed. And then," General Junho asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we show them what humanity really is," Sunwoo replied. "We don't just survive the swarm. We use the swarm as cover while we take everything the Thalrene have. Every world, every station, every colony, we take it all." The betrayal happened exactly as Yuna's intelligence predicted. The human fleet was devastated. The public reaction was everything the secret leadership hoped for. Grief and rage unified humanity in a way nothing else could have. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Resources were redirected to defense. Every human settlement became a fortress. But beneath the visible preparations, the real work continued. Una activated her sleeper agents across the galaxy. These were humans who had been placed in alien societies over decades, posing as traders, researchers, diplomats. Now they began sabotage operations, targeting infrastructure and communication networks. The aliens wouldn't know they were under attack until it was far too late. Dr. Bowman uploaded his virus to the network hubs humanity had installed. In Thalrene systems, under the guise of improving communications, the virus spread silently, mapping every system it touched and reporting back to human controllers. The Thalrene military networks were particularly vulnerable. They had used human-provided upgrades extensively, never imagining those upgrades contained invisible weapons. General. The vessels were painted black, running silent, invisible to the sensors the aliens used. They waited, cruise alert, weapons charged. For the signal to begin the real war, the Varelian swarm approached the outer human colonies. And the galaxy watched, expecting to witness the extinction of another species. What they couldn't see was the trap being prepared. Humanity had studied the swarm extensively during the war, captured bioships, examined their biology, learned how their hive mind functioned. The aliens assumed humans were simply gathering intelligence to help the coalition. In reality, humanity was learning how to kill the swarm efficiently and how to control it. Colonel Juan commanded Earth's defense fleet, the visible military force that would face the swarm when it arrived. His ships were equipped with weapons specifically designed to disrupt hive mind cohesion. The swarm thought in patterns communicated through biological signals. Humanity had learned to jam those signals, to inject false data, to turn the hive mind's efficiency into confusion and chaos. Will the defenses hold? Sunwoo asked him during a final briefing. The swarm will get trapped in the Sol system, Juan replied confidently. They'll come expecting an easy meal and find a nightmare instead. While they're dying here, your shadow fleet can do what needs to be done. Una sat in her command center and watched the pieces move into position. The Thalrene were celebrating their successful betrayal, believing themselves safe. The coalition species were offering useless condolences to humanity, while preparing to divide up human territory after the swarm finished its work. The galaxy thought it knew how this story would end. They were all catastrophically wrong, Director Una said into her all assets are in position. Intelligence network is active across 47 systems. Sabotage operations ready to execute. We're prepared to begin on your signal. Sunwoo looked at the tactical displays showing both the approaching swarm and the hidden human fleet. 30 years of preparation had led to this moment. The galaxy had betrayed humanity, tried to sacrifice an entire species for political convenience. Now they would learn why that was a fatal mistake. Signal all commands, Sunwoo ordered. Operation Complete Seizure is now active. Show them what humanity can do. The Varelian swarm entered the Sol system, expecting to find a desperate, dying species making its final stand. Instead, they encountered something the hive mind had never seen before. Colonel Juan's defense fleet didn't try to stop the swarm. They guided it exactly where humanity wanted it to go. Activate the disruption field, Juan ordered from his command ship. Across the system, hidden satellites powered up and began broadcasting signals specifically designed to interfere with Varelian hive communication. The bioships suddenly found their coordination failing. Individual ships received conflicting instructions. The unified swarm began to fragment into confused clusters. The bioships tried to adapt. But humanity had spent 3 years learning every pattern the swarm used. Every time the hive mind adjusted, human systems countered with a new disruption frequency. The swarm found itself trapped in Earth's gravity well, unable to coordinate an effective attack or organize a retreat. Ships crashed into each other, weapons fired at empty space, entire formations drifted aimlessly. They're stuck, Juan reported to Director Sunwoo. The swarm is dying in orbit, exactly as planned. They'll be fully neutralized within 48 hours, while the galaxy watched Earth's desperate defense. Admiral Seizure led the Shadow Fleet out of hiding and jumped directly toward Thalrene space. 400 warships, each one built in secret using the best technology humanity could steal or create, appeared on sensors across a dozen systems simultaneously. The element of surprise was total and devastating. The first system they hit was a Thalrene military outpost. Admiral Seizure didn't bother with communications or warnings. His fleet simply opened fire with weapons the Thalrene had never encountered. Magnetic accelerator cannons that punched through shields like they didn't exist. Plasma torpedoes that burned hotter than any Thalrene weapon. Energy beams that cut capital ships in half. The outpost fell in 6 hours. Not a single Thalrene vessel escaped to warn others. Seizure left a small garrison and moved to the next target, a coalition trade hub controlled by a species called the Ventari. The Ventari were traders, not warriors, and they surrendered immediately when the human fleet arrived. "You're making a mistake," the Ventari station master pleaded over the cum. "The coalition will not tolerate this aggression." Captain Nari, commanding one of Seogen's cruiser groups, responded with cold precision. "The coalition already made its choice when it allowed our betrayal. Now you make yours. Submit to human authority or die. You have 1 hour to decide." The Ventari chose survival. Within the hour, human Marines were occupying the station, securing its resources, and establishing military control. The pattern repeated across a dozen systems over the next week. Human forces appeared without warning, demanded immediate surrender, and moved on before effective resistance could be organized. Behind the military advance, Dr. Bowman's cybervirus activated across the Thalrene Empire. Power grids failed without warning. Communication networks crashed. Military targeting systems reported false data. Ships lost navigation capability mid-flight. The virus spread through every system the Thalrene military used, turning their technological superiority into a catastrophic weakness. The Thalrene Empire tried to rally its forces, but coordination was impossible with communications failing randomly. Fleets couldn't find each other. Commanders couldn't reach their ships. Defensive positions didn't receive warning about human attacks. The ancient empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years found itself paralyzed by sabotage. Couldn't detect or stop. UNA's intelligence network activated across 47 systems simultaneously. Sleeper agents who had posed as civilians for decades revealed themselves and began targeted strikes. Power plants exploded. Fuel depots burned. Ammunition factories went critical. The agents had been positioned for this exact moment, waiting for years to strike in perfect coordination. General Junho brought the main Shadow Fleet through the corridor. Tianjin had carved, heading directly toward Thalrene Prime. Every system between Sol and the Thalrene homeworld fell under human control within 3 weeks. Coalition species that had expressed regret about humanity's fate now begged for mercy as human. Fleets occupied their space. The Karathi, a species that had been minor allies of the Thalrene, tried to resist. Captain Nara's cruiser group encountered their defense fleet and demonstrated why resistance was futile. The human weapons were simply better built, without the ethical restrictions the coalition imposed. Banned technologies that the Thalrene considered too dangerous to use were standard equipment on human vessels. The Korathi fleet died in minutes. Nari didn't waste time with occupation. She simply destroyed their military capability and moved on. The message was clear: surrender immediately or face total destruction. After the Korathi example, other species stopped trying to fight. On Earth, Swarm's attack had completely collapsed. The bioships floated dead in orbit, their hive mind fractured beyond recovery. Colonel Wan's forces began capturing intact specimens, using them to refine humanity's understanding of swarm biology. The species that was supposed to destroy Earth had instead become research material. Director Sun Wu broadcast a message to the Galactic Coalition from his command center. "You abandoned us to die. You made deals with monsters to save yourselves. You thought humanity would be erased from the galaxy. He paused, letting his words carry across the FTL communication network. You were wrong. The swarm is broken. Your military networks are compromised. Your space is now our space. Every species that participated in our betrayal will now submit to human authority. The galaxy reeled in shock. In less than a month, humanity had gone from apparent extinction to controlling a third of civilized space. The Thelrene Empire, the oldest power in the known galaxy, is collapsing under simultaneous military assault and infrastructure sabotage. Species that had existed for millions of years were surrendering to a race that had only reached the stars a century ago. Admiral Seizure fleet reached the outer defenses of Thelrene Prime. The homeworld was protected by orbital fortresses that had never fallen in 3,000 years of warfare. Seizure studied the defenses and smiled. All ships, load the siege weapons. Let's show them what humanity builds when we stop following their rules. The siege weapons were humanity's most extreme creation. Orbital bombardment systems that could crack planets, weapons so powerful they had been banned by every galactic treaty. The Thelrene had assumed those treaties protected them. They had forgotten that humanity never actually signed those treaties. It simply agreed to follow them as part of coalition membership. That membership had ended with the betrayal. The fortresses around Thelrene Prime opened fire, but human ships absorbed the damage and kept coming. Then the siege weapons fired. The orbital fortresses simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energy output that exceeded anything the Thelrene thought possible. The ancient defenses, built over centuries, fell in hours. General Junho contacted Seizure as the homeworld's shields began to fail. Don't destroy the planet. We're going to occupy it. I want every Thelrene to see human soldiers walking through their capital, controlling their world. I want them to understand exactly what they created when they betrayed us. Across the galaxy, coalition species watched in horror as humanity demonstrated what they truly were. Not the primitive species that needed protection and guidance, but a race that had been preparing for galactic war since the moment they encountered alien life. Every friendly gesture had been intelligence gathering. Every treaty acceptance had been temporary cooperation. Humanity had been studying, learning, and building the tools needed for absolute conquest. The age of cooperation was over. The age of human dominance had begun. It's enforced not through diplomacy, but through overwhelming military force and the absolute certainty that humanity would never allow itself to be vulnerable again. The galaxy had taught humanity that trust was weakness. They had learned that lesson perfectly. Admiral Seijure's fleet entered orbit around Thelrene Prime, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the ancient capital world lay defenseless before an enemy force. The orbital fortresses were debris fields. The planetary shields had collapsed. The Thelrene military, crippled by Dr. Bowman's virus and Eunice sabotage network, couldn't mount organized resistance. The Thelrene Emperor sent a desperate communication. Admiral Seizure, we can negotiate. The betrayal was a mistake, a political miscalculation. We offer full reparations, territory, technology transfers. We will recognize human sovereignty over all captured systems. Please, there is no need for further bloodshed. Seizure listened to the plea and then replied with words that would echo through galactic history. You don't understand. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to take everything you have. General Junho led the occupation force down to the planet's surface. 200,000 human soldiers in powered armor descended on the capital city, moving with precision and overwhelming force. The Thelrene security forces, trained for ceremonial duty more than actual combat, surrendered almost immediately. Within 6 hours, human troops controlled every government building, every communication hub, every power station in the capital. The Thelrene Emperor watched from his palace as human soldiers marched through streets that had never known conquest. Captain Daeun, promoted to invasion commander after Kazari Nebula, led a battalion directly to the Imperial Palace. The ancient building was a monument to Thelrene power. It's filled with art and artifacts from 3 millennia of galactic dominance. Now human boots echoed through its halls. Your Majesty, Daeun said as he entered the throne room. His rifle held casually but ready, You are under arrest for crimes against humanity. This palace, this world, and your entire empire now belong to us." The Emperor, a massive reptilian being who had ruled for 2 centuries, looked at the young humans standing before him. "This is madness. The galaxy will not accept human rule. Other species will unite against you." Daon smiled without humor. "They can try. We'll be waiting." Across the Thelrene Empire, similar scenes played out. Every major world, every industrial center, every military installation fell under human control within 2 weeks. The Empire's military couldn't coordinate defense with their networks compromised. Their allies couldn't help with human fleets controlling all space routes. The conquest was methodical, unstoppable, absolutely brutal in its efficiency. Lieutenant Hyjin led boarding teams onto Thelrene military vessels, disarming crews and taking control of ships. The roles had reversed completely. Where once humans had been the desperate underdogs fighting alongside Thelrene power, now the Thelrene begged for mercy while human soldiers determined their fate. Hyjin felt no sympathy. She remembered too many friends who had died at Kazari Nebula, killed because the Thelrene chose betrayal. Director Sunwoo traveled to Thelrene Prime once the occupation was complete. He walked through the Imperial Palace, now guarded by human soldiers, and stood on the balcony where Thelrene emperors had addressed the galaxy for 3,000 years. Every major species had representatives watching, either in person or through communication feeds. "The Galactic Coalition is hereby dissolved," Sunwoo announced, his voice calm and absolute. "Humanity is now the supreme authority in this region of space. All species will retain autonomy in their internal affairs. You may govern your own worlds as you see fit. But all military forces are disbanded. All strategic resources are placed under human control. All interstellar policy is subject to human approval." Representatives erupted in protest. The Ventari ambassador stood, his face showing genuine fear. "You cannot do this. You're one species trying to control hundreds?" "It's impossible." "We already did it," Sunwoo replied. "In 1 month, we conquered the largest empire in the galaxy and occupied every strategic position between here and Sol. Your fleet surrendered. Your defenses failed. Your ancient power collapsed. This is not a negotiation. This is reality." Karathi representative tried to appeal to reason. "What about the other powers beyond this sector? The Azani Collective, the Hive Queens, the Silicon Consensus? They will not accept human dominance. They're welcome to try to stop us. We'll be ready. But for now, they're watching what happened to the Thelrene Empire. They're calculating whether resistance is worth the cost. Most will choose cooperation." He paused, letting his next words carry maximum weight. "Any species that resists human authority will face what the Thelrene faced. Any species that complies will be protected. That includes protection from the Varelian swarm, which we can now control." The galaxy had been watching Earth's defense against the swarm, assuming humanity was fighting for survival. The truth was far more significant. Colonel Wan's forces hadn't just stopped the swarm, they had captured it. Using the hive disruption technology and biological knowledge gained during the war, humanity had taken control of the scattered swarm clusters and turned them into a weapon. "The swarm exists as a contained force in several quarantine zones," Sunwoo explained. "We can release it or control it as needed. Any species that threatens humanity or destabilizes the peace we're establishing will find the swarm, redirected toward their space. We learned this tactic from the Thelrene. They taught us that using others as shields is acceptable strategy. We simply perfected it." Back on Earth, Dr. Bowman monitored the galactic communication networks. Species across known space were broadcasting emergency sessions, trying to decide how to respond. Some called for unified resistance. Others advocated immediate submission. None had any realistic plan to oppose humanity. The military advantage was too great, the surprise too complete. The human willingness to use extreme force to clear Yuna's intelligence network continued expanding, operating openly in many systems. The sleeper agents who had hidden for decades were now recruitment centers, bringing local populations into the human intelligence apparatus. Some joined willingly, seeing the way power had shifted. Others were coerced through blackmail or threats. The network grew daily, assuring humanity would see any future threat coming long before it materialized. General Shinho established military governments across the conquered territory. Human administrators worked with local populations to maintain basic services and order. But ultimate authority rested with human commanders. The occupation was designed to be permanent. These worlds would never return to independent rule. Within a year of the betrayal at Kesari Nebula, humanity controlled every major trade route. Military installation, an industrial center in the sector. The Galactic Coalition had been replaced by the human authority. Species that once looked down on humanity as primitives now petitioned human bureaucrats for basic rights and permissions. The Thalreen Empire existed only as a historical footnote. Its worlds occupied, its military scattered, its emperor imprisoned. Other species learned the lesson. Cross humanity and face extinction. Cooperate and receive protection. The choice was brutally simple. Captain Daeun stood on a balcony at the Imperial Palace, now humanity's sector headquarters, looking up at the alien sky. Ships bearing human insignia moved through orbital traffic, carrying resources and personnel across an empire that stretched across 200 systems. A century ago, humanity had been confined to one solar system, primitive and isolated. Now, they ruled a third of the galaxy. Daeun considered the question. He thought about friends who died at Kesari Nebula, about the betrayal, about the galaxy's willingness to watch humanity die. They gave us two choices, he said finally. Be victims or be conquerors. There was no middle ground, no path to safety through cooperation. They made sure of that when they betrayed us. So we chose to be what they feared instead of what they could destroy, Hyjin said. Across the galaxy, the reality of human dominance settled in. Some species adapted quickly, finding profitable roles in the new order. Others resisted quietly, hoping for liberation that would never come. A few tried open rebellion and were crushed with methodical efficiency. The human authority did not tolerate threats. Director Sunwoo broadcast his final message to the galaxy from the throne room of Thalreen Prime. We did not start this war. We came to the stars seeking cooperation and found exploitation. We offered friendship and received betrayal. The galaxy taught us that power is the only currency that matters, that trust is a weakness, that survival requires absolute strength. He paused, his face showing no regret, only cold determination. You created this version of humanity. You showed us that cooperation was a trap, that alliances were temporary, that the only way to be safe was to control everything. We learned well. The age of galactic cooperation ended when you betrayed us. The age of human dominance begins now, enforced through strength, maintained through vigilance. Sunwoo finished with words that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations. We will never be vulnerable again. We will never trust blindly again. We will never give anyone the opportunity to destroy us. The Thalreen thought they could use us and discard us. Instead, they lost everything. Let that be a lesson to anyone who thinks humanity can be manipulated or defeated. The broadcast ended. Across 200 systems, species processed the new reality.